You walk through a museum and see a small, carefully wrapped bundle behind glass. A cat, or so the label says, bandaged with the same precision as a pharaoh. You assume it's rare, a singular act of devotion toward a beloved pet. It isn't. Beneath the deserts of Egypt, archaeologists have found an estimated 70 million mummified animals. Not 70, not 700, 70 million. And the reason behind it is far stranger than simple affection. This wasn't a niche practice. It was one of the largest industries in the ancient world, and almost nobody talks about it. Picture the underground tunnels at Saqqara, carved beneath Egypt's earliest pyramid. Researchers from Cardiff University, led by archaeologist Paul Nicholson, spent years mapping a single network there known as the Catacombs of Anubis. What they found defied expectation. An estimated 8 million animal mummies packed floor to ceiling in total darkness, almost entirely dogs. Why dogs? Because Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the dead, demanded them. And demand at that scale required something most people never associate with ancient Egypt: mass production. Egyptologist Salima Ikram has argued that numbers this large point towards something resembling industrial breeding operations, effectively ancient puppy mills, built specifically to supply this single religious economy. Most of the animals found weren't elderly pets who lived full lives. Many were newborns, deliberately bred and likely killed within days, sometimes hours of birth. The sheer volume made elaborate care impossible. Quantity was the entire business model. This wasn't an isolated case either. Archaeologists have identified roughly 30 separate catacombs across Egypt, each dedicated to a single species. Cats for Bastet, falcons and ibises for Thoth, crocodiles for Sobek. Each catacomb, in its own way, functioned like a specialized factory feeding a specific god. The sacred ibis catacombs alone are believed to contain millions of birds. Genetic researchers studying ibis mummies have found something telling: distinct lineages of birds across different sites, hinting that the Egyptians may have operated dedicated large-scale breeding farms specifically to keep pace with religious demand, rather than relying on wild populations that simply couldn't sustain numbers this high. Here's where the story takes a turn nobody expects. In one of the largest studies of its kind, researchers at the University of Manchester used CT scanners and X-ray machines, the kind typically used on living children, to look inside more than 800 animal mummies without unwrapping them. The results were not what anyone anticipated. Roughly one-third contained a complete, intact animal skeleton. Another third contained only partial remains, sometimes a single bone. The final third contained no animal material whatsoever, just mud, sticks, feathers, eggshells, materials that had simply been near an animal at some point. Egyptologist Lydia McKnight, who led the research, was careful about how she framed this. It likely wasn't fraud in the way you'd assume today. Demand for these offerings vastly outpaced the supply of animals available to mummify them properly, so embalmers adapted, wrapping whatever organic material was available in the elaborate, recognizable shape pilgrims expected to see. In other words, you weren't necessarily buying a dead cat, you were buying a symbol shaped exactly like one. This detail completely reframes what this practice actually was. Smithsonian curator Melinda Zeder has pointed out something that initially sounds contradictory. Ancient Egyptians weren't obsessed with death. They were obsessed with life, and specifically with continuing it forever. Every elaborately wrapped animal, real or partial or symbolic, was a transaction. A pilgrim would purchase the mummy, hand it to a priest, and that priest would dedicate it to a god on the pilgrim's behalf, creating a permanent record of devotion meant to echo into eternity. It functioned remarkably similarly to lighting a candle in a church today. You're not powering anything mechanically. You're making a gesture meant to be witnessed by something larger than yourself, and you're trusting that the gesture itself carries weight, regardless of the precise material reality behind it. This reframes the 70 million number entirely. It wasn't really about the animals at all. The animals were the medium. The actual product being manufactured, packaged, and sold at sacred sites across Egypt for over 1,000 years was something far less tangible. A guaranteed connection between an ordinary person and the divine, something durable enough to outlast their own lifetime. Which raises an interesting question about a need that clearly hasn't gone anywhere. You don't mummify falcons for Thoth anymore, but the underlying impulse, the desire for some tangible proof that you mattered to something eternal, that your devotion was registered somewhere permanent, that you'll be remembered by forces larger than your own short life, never really disappeared. It just changed packaging. You walk past that small wrapped bundle in the museum case one more time. It might be a cat, it might be mud and feathers shaped like one. From a distance, and even up close, it's nearly impossible to tell the difference. And for the person who paid for it 3,000 years ago, that may have never been the point. If this changed the way you look at that little wrapped bundle behind museum glass, subscribe. There's a lot more buried under what we think we know about the ancient world.